Reentry is responsible for the majority of clinically relevant tachyarrhythmias. It occurs when an electrical impulse doesn't cease at the end of one cardiac cycle, but rather persists and re-excites the heart as part of a self-propagating mechanism. Reentrant tachycardias are rarely referred to by a variety of other names, including but not limited to reciprocating tachycardias and circus movement tachycardias. For the most part, these alternative terms are archaic and fell from popularity several decades ago. I'm now going to go through the actual mechanism of reentry. Because it's both complicated and really important, I'm actually going to review it twice. The first time largely with verbal description, and the second with animation. So what are the conditions necessary for reentry to occur? First, there must exist two adjacent pathways with different electrophysiologic properties, such as conduction velocity and refractoriness, which are connected both proximally and distally. Then a premature action potential hits. It can be from the atria, it can be from the ventricles, it can be from the AV junction, it can be from anywhere. But the key is the fact that it is premature means that one of the two pathways may have unilateral block caused by either prolonged refractory time or prolonged repolarization. So the premature action potential travels just down the unblocked pathway, which must have slow enough conduction for the previously blocked pathway to have recovered, allowing for retrograde conduction such that at their point of distal connection, the action potential now travels retrograde up that initially blocked pathway. When the retrograde wave of depolarization meets the proximal connection, if the refractory time in the initially unblocked pathway is short enough, it is now capable of depolarization again, this time in an antegrade fashion, like the time before, that is, in a fashion where the wavefront of depolarization moves proximally to distally. And you can see how the depolarization wave is now in a seemingly endless loop. All of this may have seemed a bit confusing to follow, so let's take a look at a simple animation for clarity. So this will represent our two pathways with a proximal and distal connection. The so-called fast pathway has fast conduction velocity and long refractory time. The slow pathway has slow conduction velocity and short refractory time. Normally, as an electrical signal comes from above, it will reach the proximal connection and travel down both pathways. Since the fast pathway is necessarily faster than the slow pathway, by the time the impulse from the slow pathway reaches the distal junction, the distal end of the fast pathway is already there, and therefore that tissue is refractory, and no reentrant loop can be established. However, imagine a single premature action potential occurs, which strikes the proximal junction at a moment when the fast pathway is still refractory, and only the slow pathway can conduct. The depolarization wave now moves down the slow pathway in an antegrade fashion, but when it reaches the distal junction, the distal end of the fast pathway is not refractory. Therefore, in addition to the wave continuing distally, it also travels backwards or retrograde up the fast pathway. When it reaches the proximal junction, the slow pathway is no longer refractory, since it has a short refractory time, and thus the impulse goes back down the slow pathway and an endless loop is established. Reentry is often subdivided into two categories based